I'm Mridul. I'm an architect with a multidisciplinary practice of close to 4 decades, based out of Jodhpur in India, a city on the fringe of the Thar Desert. In addition to architecture, our work focuses on a diverse range of disciplines like the environment, art, culture, and conservation.
And I'm Shilpa Mridul. I'm a designer and an artist with a special focus on the subjects of environment and culture.
In spite of our diverse practice in core architecture, our deepest interest and passion has been in water architecture. Traditionally, architecture has been about balancing the five elements of nature to achieve conducive and comfortable conditions for life on this planet and to cohesively coexist with the flora and fauna and the environment. Despite two-thirds of the earth being water, of the five elements, water has always been the weakest link because only 1% of all the water on earth is fresh water fit for consumption. Ever since the most primitive human settlements known to us, humans have gravitated towards water. Where there was water, there was life. But as the extent of settlements grew, be it under geographical or political constraints, communities found themselves in regions with scant direct access to water. So, from the earliest of civilizations, after shelter, architecture has been focused on containing and conserving fresh water by creating a rich portfolio of exquisite buildings as temples to water. The bedrock of sustainability in these practices rests upon the fundamental principle of collecting water where it falls. Our forebears left behind a huge legacy of knowledge system to keep the world water positive. A recurring and unifying theme that pervades all indigenous and vernacular water management practices is the proactive engagement of the communities they serve. This includes management, distribution, maintenance, and grassroots level governance. Such a comprehensive approach fosters a profound sense of ownership among the true stakeholders who remain devoted to preserving their venerable traditions and customs around water, sustaining water management practices that have endured for countless generations.
The perpetuation of the culture of these communities around water relied on the role that women played in water conservation, particularly in the context of South Asia, where water scarcity is a pressing issue with far reaching social and cultural implications. In many South Asian households, women are primarily responsible for collecting and managing water. This involves long hours of physical demanding work, such as fetching water from distant sources, often on foot, and ensuring its efficient utilization within the household. Their expertise in optimizing water use is invaluable for conserving this precious resource. Women have historically led the charge in community waste water management activities. They participate in activities like watershed management, rainwater harvesting, and commissioning the construction of aqua structures aimed at harnessing water. Their efforts contribute not only to local water conservation but also to community resilience in the face of climate change. For centuries, women in South Asia have been the unsung heroes of water conservation. Women met at these water sources, drawing water and conversing with one another. Their seemingly mundane activities birthed something extraordinary stories, songs, and folklore that have enriched the cultural fabric of South Asia. Their gatherings became more than the means to fetch water. They became epicenters of knowledge exchange, wisdom sharing, and communal strength. Women have preserved traditions that celebrate the cycles of nature, the sanctity of water, and the unity of these communities. As we reflect on these immense contributions of these guardians of water, it is important to celebrate their legacy. Their actions have not only sustained their communities, but have also paved way for a deeper understanding of the intricate relationships between people, culture, and water. As the only befitting tribute, their stories deserve to be told, their songs deserve to be sung, and their wisdom to be shared widely.
Despite such rich culture around water in South Asia and the Middle East, the afflictions of changing times and onslaught of new technologies, the legacy of water heritage got lost in the din of lopsided development that is the bane of modern world. With the advent of modern technology, which, albeit welcomed, became an agent of disruption and ultimately replaced indigenous systems through a series of abrupt conversions that ostensibly rendered these age old practices defunct. While there is an appeal to the convenience of modern technology around water, it fails to stand its ground in the face of questions of long term sustainability. Today, one fifth of the world is facing fresh water crisis. To my reckoning, there is enough fresh water that nature bestows upon us, much more than our needs. Yet, we are plunging into deep water stress. Clearly, this crunch is a man made crisis, an issue more of management rather than availability of fresh water. But the good news is that the water heritage is resilient enough to bounce back to use and offer solutions to mitigate the current water crisis. Over the last decade, our practice took a deep dive into Jodhpur's centuries old network of water bodies. The city of Jodhpur, which is located on the cusp of the Thar Desert, with no perennial rivers around it and a scant rainfall just touching 300 millimeter, and scorching heat that rises up to 50 degrees centigrade, has a robust repertoire of an array of water harvesting and management structures and practices, making it an ideal case study with the intention to attempt reviving and restoring them into the mainstream. The diverse network consisted of reservoirs, step wells or boweries, wells, step tanks, lakes, ponds, etc., which were indivisibly integrated into the fabric of the city. The pictures show the diverse portfolio of the water bodies of Jodhpur to divert and capture every drop from the sky. Natural lakes in the hillside, huge tanks set in the dense settlement, step wells, step ponds, and wells, domestic rainwater tank, aqueducts carrying water from the lakes to the city tanks, and the seasonal river charged by the surplus water. From collection, conveyance, storage, and access, these form a closely integrated network, each interconnected with the other either at surface or subsurface level. Until over a century ago, these on site indigenous water bodies were the principal sources of water in the city, and except during extended periods of drought, kept the city water positive. Traditionally, the augmentation of network of water containments to collect water where it fell was always a work in progress. The network was expanded with expanding network of towns and populations. However, with the advent of modern water infrastructure, this indigenous water bank was almost completely abandoned. This abandonment of local water bodies resulted in plunging these regions into severe water crisis. The huge repertoire of the traditional water bodies managed by communities with a participatory and democratic approach was relegated in favor of a centralized, state controlled modern water infrastructure. This, as a solely independent dispensation, has proven to be dismally insufficient in meeting the freshwater requirement of a burgeoning population. Paradoxically, the advancement of water technology, aiding water being sourced from off site locations or remotely located rivers, instead of complementing, completely replaced the indigenous water systems, which with time resulted in impoverishing the state and the city in fresh water. That the water scarcity has sparked a scramble for water. This is a situation even in the regions which fall in the sufficient and high rainfall zones. The strife is only increasing. Interstate water disputes and hydropolitics are already the new terms in currency. This portends a trend that is likely to become common in India if not taken care of in time. On the other hand, ironically, the unharnessed water gets converted into floods in the cities. Most of the rainwater is allowed to fritter away, and the total volume of water consumed in the urban areas is less than the sum of stormwater and wastewater. These facts are disheartening, yet ironically hope inducing. The pluvial flooding clearly demonstrates that towns and villages are large active catchments and that there is a great potential for rebuilding the on site water resources by harnessing the wasted rainwater from local catchments. Through decades of our practice, we have sought to understand the applicability, feasibility, and the scope of revival of these indigenous systems as an answer to the mounting water scarcity we face on a global scale. We found that striking equilibrium between traditional systems of water management and modern aqua infrastructure with an integrative approach is the answer that addresses our concerns of conservation and sustainability. Get local water network back into the mode of work in progress eternally is now the motto. It is in this background that a template of regeneration, iteration, and mainstreaming of local water bodies has been evolved to perpetuate the heritage of water. We have identified a huge number of ancient water bodies and are seeking support from philanthropists, community, and corporates to conserve, revive, and mainstream them. This picture is one of the many water bodies, step wells, and step ponds that we are regenerating. Jadechi Jhalara, a 17th century step pond on the west of Jodhpur's ancient Mehrangarh fort. This was regenerated with a collaborative effort from the neighboring community and from many organizations who had put in their effort. The picture on the left shows it fraught with deep vegetation growth and structural damage. On the right is its picture after this was conserved and restored in July 2019. It is now mainstreamed with the city's network and has got reactivated as a neighborhood community space. Return to the community, the successful regeneration clearly proves that even after being in dormancy for over a century and being in a state of grave dilapidation, these water bodies have the potential to bounce back to life, to their original form as water sources, active socio-cultural spaces, and as environmental buildings that will enhance the ecology of the place. While we direct our efforts towards conserving and rejuvenating these dilapidated water bodies, just reviving all the old water bodies will hardly be sufficient for the present and ever increasing population. So, to keep our cities water positive, we need to reboot the idea of work in progress, creating new neighborhood water buildings with expanding cities and population. The idea of iteration of the historic water architecture, the concept of building and expanding on site water buildings, has been successfully realized by the construction of a new stepwell Birka Bawri in a new housing township of Jodhpur. It is a stepwell built in this century, and to my reckoning, a stepwell built after over a century of last traditional stepwell constructed in India. This project of ours is an initiative to restore the missing link between the ancient and the contemporary, reassuring the golden era of water harvesting structures. This is a picture of the township site when the land was just acquired to develop the township. A barren landscape on a red sandstone hill, craggy and undulating. To make it an environmentally viable venture, it was imperative to create a dense green cover and ensure continuous supply of water for its sustenance. In a water scarce region with highly restricted state supplied water and forever dipping groundwater tables, the only salvation was in creating one's own source, in conserving rainwater using ancient wisdom. And this is how the idea of creating Birka Bawri, the new rainwater harvesting building, germinated. This Bawri is a massive subterranean building to hold about 17.5 million liters of water. It is a unique masonry structural system of stone sourced from the site, about 235 meters long and about 18 meters below ground. This structure descends 5 stories below ground level. A network of stormwater drains converge on either side of the Bowery. Sluice walls on either side are closed so that the first and sometimes the second flush of rain carrying dirt, muck is all diverted away. The Bowery is also a community space for people to gather and celebrate, contemporizing the socio-cultural ethos of the intimate connect that the community had with the vernacular water buildings. It has become a coveted venue for dance recitals. These water bodies can sustain only with a deep community engagement. If left as isolated infrastructure buildings, these will fall into neglect. Revisiting one of the pictures of the site before it was developed, the before and the after pictures bear testimony to the environmental and ecological transformations such projects can effect, from barren to lush green. The creation of this 21st century stepwell demonstrates that such indigenous water bodies are still viable architecturally and financially. To mitigate the water crisis, we need to foster an interaction between natural and built capital, both ancient and modern, by adopting an inclusive approach in developing a sustainable water portfolio. To expand the water heritage of South Asia and to be able to realize the full potential of the traditional knowledge systems in mitigating the water crisis, it is imperative to integrate this discipline in architecture and planning curricula so that conserving rainwater where it falls becomes a practice for future architects and planners, and by default, they start creating on site water bodies. I conclude with the hope that governments, academics, and communities of the world work in tandem to recreate such livable environments fit for a harmonious and balanced coexistence of flora, fauna, and us human beings.